everybody to Life as a Faculty Member for Aspiring Academics. I'm Melissa Gardner with the Grad Academy. For anyone who doesn't know me, I know several folks in here. But I am going to actually hand it over to my colleague, Diane Dulce, who is our Director of Communications and Marketing, and she will be introducing our panel and moderating our panel today. So over to Diane.
Thank you, Melissa. I am so glad. Oh, I like that. Okay, let's say that again. Thank you, Melissa. Woo! There we go. That's how we get started. I am so excited to be here with some amazing panelists. The first one, we have Dr. Janet Dufek, who is a professor of kinesiology and nutrition sciences. We also have Dr. Annalise Grant, assistant professor of sociology. And also, Dr. Tina Vo, who is the Associate Professor of Science Education, Teaching, and Learning. In this workshop today, our panelists will provide an inside look into the multifaceted life of a faculty member, focusing on the key responsibilities of research, teaching, and service. We're really excited. I am not going to take a long time to talk about what they're going to talk about because I'm going to let them talk about it. And to start, would you each please share about your background and your current role at UNLV, and we can start with Janet.
All right, well, thanks so much for that kind introduction. Me and my colleagues. I'm happy to be here. My name's Janet Dufek, as you heard, and I am a professor in kinesiology and nutrition sciences. My expertise is in biomechanics, lower extremity function. I am actually just moving back to the faculty role. I have just stepped out of 3.5 years working in the provost's office as vice provost for faculty affairs. Prior to that, I spent about 4.5 years as associate dean in the School of Integrated Health Sciences. And before I got into all that messy administrative stuff, I spent a lot of time here with the graduate college. I've been a faculty fellow and a grad college senior faculty fellow for numerous years. I've always enjoyed my role working with grad students and working and supporting the graduate college. So I'm very pleased to be here today. And I'd like to welcome you and turn it over to Annalise.
So I'm Annalise. I use she or they pronouns. I have a much shorter list of my background. This is only my second, and finishing up my second year as an assistant professor here in sociology. I broadly study relationships, responsibilities, and media use among low-income families in the United States from a feminist perspective. And I have some background in doing kind of hidden curriculum work, especially with grad students, both in my department and when I was a graduate student.
And hi, Tina Vo, teaching and learning, background in science education, so I really love some hard science things and some social science things, and humanities seem cool. I never thought I was going to be a professor. I never did. Even when I went back to grad school, I thought, oh, I'm just going to figure out these questions I had, and then I'm going to go back to being a teacher. I was a middle school teacher for a while. I spent a stint in preschool, but I spent a lot of time in middle school. And there was something about the academic lifestyle, there was something about the pursuit of my interests that I was like, maybe I can do this. And then suddenly I did, and you stumble your way there and you find that your story is a lot like other people's stories and a little bit different. So I hope this panel helps today figuring out where you all want to be and what you all want to do.
Thank you, Tina. That was really good. I think what I've gathered from this is that your background can be different and you can still end up being a professor. You can still end up in the research world, which is why I'm really excited about the next question, which is, what are the primary responsibilities of a faculty member in your field in terms of research, teaching, and service, and how does it change at different stages of an academic career? And whoever wants to go first.
Why don't we take it?
We're going from the least amount of time.
Well, because of the point that you raised,
Yes.
how you want to address this.
So I recently learned that the official division, at least in my role, is 40% research, 40% teaching, 20% service. But I would say, and in the short time I've been doing the job, and also from advice that I've heard from colleagues, is that especially pre-tenure, which is where I am, research is really the thing that matters, and it's where I am expected to spend a lot of my time. I, of course, don't spend my time perfectly as expected. I am someone who keeps track of my time doing work, which is not what all academics do. I use an app called Clockify. It's totally free, recommend it. But I started doing it actually in grad school when I first started teaching, because I found myself spending, like, you can let yourself teach forever and then you don't end up getting the research things that you have to get done. So I find it, like, just keeping track of my time allows me to visualize how much time I'm spending on teaching versus research, and that's been really helpful. And so I would say, like, for me right now, the thing that I have to focus on ends up being research, because that's what is a big part of getting tenure, at least in my field and department.
Oh, can I ask a follow-up question to that? What is Clockify and how can they use it?
Yeah, you can Google it. It's totally free. I don't even have the app on my computer. I just log into clockify.time.com or something every day. It allows you to, like, keep track of, it's like for businesses to keep track of people being paid for time that they're spending. But I just use it where I have, like, specific projects and then I categorize things as research, teaching, service, mentoring, etc. But it automatically will create, like, pie charts, like really visible pie charts of how you spent your time in different weeks or in any time period that you want. Which is also really good for future planning. Like, I learned that I had to revise and resubmit that took me 80 hours total, which is a lot of hours. But it's also like that you can't keep telling yourself you can do it in a weekend. There's literally not 80 hours in a weekend. Yeah, so I find it helpful.
Thank you. I love software, so I was like, okay, a new software. Not that I'm gonna use it tomorrow, but maybe you should look into it. So thank you so much for that. And what would you say to that, Tina, about the primary responsibilities of a faculty member in your field in terms of research, teaching, and service, and how does that change at different stages?
Yeah, I'm gonna answer that backwards. In terms of stages, all of you are probably planning on a dissertation. Imagine managing 4 dissertations at once, and that's your assistant professor phase. And you will. The thing is, like, you do it once, and suddenly you know all of the weird tips and tricks and how you work. I promise. The first dissertation, super hard, but, like, then you manage multiple projects as an assistant professor. That's what you're gearing up for, right? Like, you have, and it will never be as high stakes again, so that's amazing. Okay? And then suddenly you get tenure, which you will. And it will be an amazing time, and then you're just like, what? So that's where I'm at. I've just made tenure. I'm looking at, like, oh, I can pivot my research wherever I want. I'm not gonna, like, go off into La La Land, but I'm just like, this or this or this, and it's one of those. Like, you can change your research agenda. You can go in all of these different directions, and you start focusing less on research and maybe more on teaching or service, or again, changing your research. I think that to get to assistant professorhood, right, like, it's where you want to be. Making sure that your research is very tight and that you communicate it really well is important. And then when we think about teaching, research, and service in percentages, those are things we tell ourselves to, like, be able to function as humans, because humans like having something solid to hold on to. But at the end of the day, it's how well you can negotiate something goes into teaching, or something goes into service, or something that goes into research. How you define that and where you put it. And I put it by things, and each section for me is divided into things that I have to do as responsibilities to my department, and things that I really want to do. And so I'll put myself extra out for that. So as you go through this journey as graduate students, thinking about this assistant professor step that's next, there are things that you have to do to graduate, right? Like, follow the grad college's guidelines. Make sure that you're very familiar with the handbook. They give you amazing resources. And then there are the extra things, like attending these amazing events that the grad student organizations put on, and the grad college puts on, and the grad academy puts on. And I would make extra efforts to do those, because those are only additive. And it's where you put your time and attention that really, like, grow you as an academic. So it's those two things. You can't just be your dissertation all the time. You can't just be those projects. You have to, find the joy. That's what I got.
I really like that, Tina, because we send a newsletter, so you should read that, because we put all of our events in there. And while I really like the part that you mentioned about communicating your research very well, and since I'm here, I'm gonna say this, we have the Rebel Grad Slam, which is every year in November. So this is a practice way of how you communicate your research. It's a 3-minute thesis competition. You have 3 minutes, 1 slide, and you have to communicate your research within that time frame. Really see it as a way of you just want to actually communicate your research, and you want to be able to practice. And if you actually are the winner, you get to actually compete nationally, right? And whether you win or not, I really see it as a way of you get to practice communicating your research, and you get judged and you get points. And if I'm you, whether you win or not, I would still ask those people, what advice would you have for me? So that is coming up in November. We send emails about that, so keep an eye out from that. Okay, I segue. So
Yes.
back to you, Janet. So
All right,
the
so-
same question.
Excellent. 3MT, put it on your calendar
Yes,
right now.
it's in
That's-
November.
Absolutely,
So,
that's
yes.
one of the best experiences. Great event. I agree with everything my colleagues have said to date. Let's start with moving into a position. Now, we're speaking as if you're moving into a research position at, R1 or an R2. That's the assumption that research is part of your workload, as opposed to at UNLV, we also have faculty and residents whose primary responsibilities are teaching. So when we talk about the workload separation, we are speaking from the research and faculty. And the 40-40-20 piece is pretty common across units, but one of the things that you want to be attentive to when you're negotiating your first position as an assistant professor is to try to reduce as much as possible, and I don't say this from a negative, I say it from a time perspective. You should be requesting a reduced workload in teaching initially, because what you're going to find is that although you've had experience as a graduate student teacher, likely, it takes a lot of time when you're on the other side of the desk for the first couple of years. I used to talk to my students when I was an assistant professor and say, we're together here for 1 hour in this class, and it was not at this institution, it was at another institution, doesn't matter. I said, I prepare as your professor 3 hours before every 1 hour lecture. So what do you think my expectations are of you as a student? So, but I'm a pretty hard grader, so it doesn't have to be 3 hours, but just to kind of put that into perspective, that's really what it takes. And I agree with Annalise that the research needs to be the focus as you're moving into your position. You might be in a place where you're coming in and you're building a laboratory, or you don't have a space. So those first couple of years, or you're developing a community. In health sciences, you may have to develop partnerships with medical facilities so that you can recruit clients and such and so on. And then the service piece, start small. Think about serving at the department level or your school or college level. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you jump into university service committees initially, because what happens is those roles become the expectation of your senior associate professors and your full professors. Because as one moves from assistant to associate, heavy sigh, breathe a breath of relief, I'm tenured, I'm good, I can do all the things that Tina said. You can do now, you can pivot, do different things, you're a little more flexible. As you move to a full professor role, you have different responsibilities. You have a lot more leadership responsibilities that aren't written down but are expected at your unit level, your department level. You are expected to contribute at your school or college level in a leadership role. You may be serving on promotion and tenure committees, faculty personnel committees and such at this level. And you're certainly expected to be a voice for your unit at the institution. So you're out at the university and meeting others and working with others. And if by the time you're a full professor, if you can't walk across campus and identify 5 people or 10 people from different units that you've done something with, whether it's graduate college, executive committee, or personnel committees, or program review committees, whatever it is, people that you've led your institution with, if you don't develop those relationships, you're not doing your job. But that's only my opinion.
Wait, can I add to
Yes,
that?
go
Janet brought up a really great thing that I think all of you need to know about if you don't. There's something that's called the Carnegie Classification of Universities. And they tell you lots of different universities where you might work as faculty someday. You are currently at an R1 university.
Research very high,
Yeah,
very
Mhm.
high.
but there are also R2s where you might teach more and have a little bit less research, but you'd still be expected to research. I would say, and then I'm jumping ahead in questions.
It's okay.
My unit would expect me to publish as an assistant professor 2 to 3 times a year, where an R2 might publish maybe 1 to 2 times a year, and R3 might publish once a year. And then there's M categorizations where a master's is your highest degree, and you might teach much more in those, and then you might be expected to publish once every other year. Does that make sense? And then there are SLACs, which is small liberal arts colleges, and then there are, what am I missing here?
I don't know.
There are
community colleges.
Community colleges are, which are great, like, so
Other
they're
regional teaching centered universities, which we don't really have in Nevada, but they do exist elsewhere.
so all of these would give you an academic lifestyle, just a different one that's less focused on research. Does that make sense? So yeah. Oh,
Does it go, it counts when you are like a second, if you are not the first publisher, if you are the second one or third one, it will count as a publication or not, or you have to be the primary.
it depends on your university.
Yeah.
And discipline.
Yes and no. So I think at the junior faculty level, you need to make your space. You need to make your name. So you'll see more lead authorships. By the time you get to my role, I'm never lead. My
Yeah.
students are leads. I'm the senior faculty member, so I'm like the last author. It doesn't matter. The piece about being second author or third author, that demonstrates collaborations, and it's good, but you can't live on, in Tina's case, if you need 3 pubs in a year, you can't live on 3 third author or fourth author publications if you're an assistant professor. You're going to have at least one that you're leading on. And it does vary by institution as well. These are types of questions that during your interview process you'll want to ask individuals. You know, what are these expectations? How is this viewed in this unit? I think that your interview process is a two-way street. You know, the institution is interviewing you, but you're also interviewing the institution to see if it's a good fit match for you. I got off the point.
It's
Sorry.
okay. It's okay. I know we talked about research a lot, and we talked about publishing. So you are in different academic disciplines. So how would you say the expectation for research output vary across those different academic disciplines?
Janet, can I ask if you consider yourself a hard science? I consider
do.
you a hard science, but
I do.
so we have a hard science, a social science, and a humanities.
Social science.
Oh, are you social science?
Sociology.
Sociology.
Social science.
I just always assume you're humanity.
No.
I like you better with us.
I think some people consider themselves humanities, but
I love
it's a social
this.
science.
Can we get a poll in the room if you were in hard sciences? So okay. Then social sciences,
That's okay.
humanities. Okay.
So I forgot the question.
Okay, yes. They
That's
were
what
having
happens
too
at this
much
side,
fun.
too.
So the question was, how do the expectations for research output vary across different academic disciplines? Since two of you are from the same academic disciplines,
Yeah.
2 people can just answer that one. Yeah.
I think because even hearing your research, your publication expectations are higher than ours are.
You're
so
expected a book though.
No, not necessarily.
Why?
This is
Okay. No books for us.
we have, but so yeah, this is why I think it really varies by discipline. Even so, like in sociology, for example, like there are book departments and there are article departments. My department is fine with both, but there are like really differing expectations based on both like institution and norms of histories and norms of departments. So like 2 articles a year for us would be a lot. I know there are other humanities that would, even my publication, I think we say like 6 to 8 articles or a book and a couple articles.
For tenure.
For tenure. And I think that is also fairly high for some humanities. So I think it really varies. Yeah.
So one thing to that question, one thing we have to consider is the impact factor or the significance of the publication relative to your field, because different journals are tiered. So, for example, in my field, if I were to publish maybe 4 papers in a flagship journal, which is Medicine, Science, and Sport and Exercise, that would be wild and good and good academic year. Unlikely that would happen. Might have one in that top tier journal, perhaps 2 or 3 in second level journals and such. And I had another thought and I lost it, but that's what happens when you get to this point, you lose thoughts. The other piece is that as you move from your first and second and third year as an assistant professor closer to tenure, it's good and expected that you drop back in the publication authorship list where you're featuring your students, where your students are lead authors. And that demonstrates your mentorship abilities, not only in research, but in being able to teach students and to develop students. This is on the record. I'll go ahead and say it anyway. I've always said to my doc students, every single doctoral student that I've mentored, I don't know, across universities, it's 30-ish, I don't know, more. If you do not graduate this program smarter and better than me, I have not done my job. And it was interesting because the first PhD student that ever graduated from UNLV in a new PhD program from kinesiology was my student. He graduated 10 years ago, and he was back in town last weekend. So we got together, and as he was leaving, we were talking about some of the students that he's mentoring. And he turned to me and he said, you know, I mentor my students like you do. He said, I tell them if they are not smarter and better, and you don't mean smarter, what you really mean is able to negotiate the academic institution at a much higher level, being more tech savvy, being able to, having greater bandwidth, having, skills that are more advanced than I have to deal, at that point, to deal with the advances in society. So just some other points. So number of papers, discipline specific. It's not only number, but it's impact factor or quality as well. And they balance out. And that also balances with author position and such.
Empirical peer-reviewed papers are always higher, along with journals that you submit to. When I first entered my first assistant professor job, it was about developing a pipeline. Your dissertation is your first pot of publications, depending on how you do it. And then that gives you about a year to get those published while getting your other lines of research up. Does that make sense? The biggest shift I had moving from a graduate student to an assistant professor and being successful was parsing out what I was going to try to do in a year to what I was trying to do over the next 5 years. When I was an assistant professor, we had COVID, and it shut down publishing pipelines, but it didn't matter because I had 5 years to get this done. Does that make sense? Like I guess at 2 to 3 a year, but I had 1 year where 4 things hit and 1 year where nothing hit. And you get more comfortable with those things versus you who are probably having to produce every single year to show growth in your programs. Does that make sense? And it's a weird mind shift, but you can do it, I promise. It's just a little tricky on your way there.
Can I do a grad college plug?
Sure. Please do a grad college plug. I live for grad college plugs.
UNLV's graduate college is very contemporary and very forward-thinking. And you all have options now at the dissertation level based upon your units, and if they ascribe to these, to do a single traditional dissertation or to do a 3-article dissertation. And I think that has been incredible, the latter, the 3-article dissertation, has been incredibly valuable for our students to do exactly what Tina said. So you're going out into your first position with these 3 papers be submitted. You have to submit them before you graduate, but then they're not going to be published by the time you graduate. They're going to be revised and resubmitted and all those types of things. So now you have 3 big pots to work on just out of the chute. And that can be so valuable as you're taking the time to develop your courses and such, knowing that you have this other resource that you can move forward with. So thank you for giving our students that option.
Yeah, and I love that we kind of segue into teaching because I know we've been talking about research, so we're going to segue into teaching right after Tina finished her last thought.
And grants. You can't forget the importance of grants. So as a social scientist, but I also focus on science. Like science is my background, geologist by trade. I normally put in one grant a year knowing that it's going to be rejected in the hopes that every other year I might have something hit. I actually have a pretty good grant achieving record at like 30%. Right, like that is a really high percentage. Like more successful people in my field have like 10% just because they know volume gets hit. Does that make sense? So many research universities also have grant expectations as part of tenure. If you're in the hard sciences, you can absolutely expect that. In the social sciences, like we probably have to apply for grants. Achieving them is a different story, and humanities don't have that expectation, but if you got a grant in the humanities, that would be like a killer score. And we get that by partnering with each other. It doesn't have to be on you. You don't have to lead a grant as an assistant professor, but like getting on, finding those partnerships.
Yeah. And another grad college blog, we actually do have workshops on grants and things like that.
Which
so
is amazing for grad students.
Keep an eye out for that. The Grad
I never had
Academy,
that.
I can't thank them enough. They actually have amazing professional development opportunities for you all. So the next question I do have regarding teaching is, how can new faculty members establish their teaching philosophy and cultivate their teaching style? And I can start with you, Annalise.
Oh man, this is rough. I did actually want to say one more thing about grants briefly, because I think that a really important and good opportunity is there are dissertation grants, like there are grants that are available to you while you are a graduate student, and even if you don't get them, the process of applying to them is really valuable and really helpful. And then if you do, I was lucky enough to get a pretty big dissertation grant. Big for my field,
They
not
look
big for
amazing.
other fields. But yeah, it really helped me with the job market. It helped show that like I have experience with grants and have applied for them, which helps with applying for R1s if anyone's ever trying to apply to a top research school. Yes, and then with teaching, how to prepare as a new faculty member, I think a piece of it is like having a good idea of what you think your pedagogy is or your teaching philosophy is in grad school, starting to think of those things then. You have to write a teaching statement for a lot of job applications. It's helpful to have an idea of what you're going to put in there. But then also doing, as Janet mentioned, of like trying to negotiate down your teaching sounds like it means you don't care about teaching, but it actually means that you have more time and space in that first year or so to really think about how you're going to set up these courses, especially once you're in your institution as an assistant professor. You can expect that you're likely going to keep teaching these courses that you teach those first couple years. So giving yourself the like time and space to really set up what you want them to be, so then when you have to teach them again, they can run themselves or they are doing what you expect, I think is really helpful and has been helpful for me. It has meant a lot more teaching work on the front end that not everyone would recommend. But has meant that like I feel confident about the courses that I teach and how I teach them.
Okay, so negotiating, big factor. What about you, Janet? What would you say to that?
So this is really interesting because listening to you speak, I'm thinking I'm in a situation right now where I haven't been in the classroom since pre-COVID because of just when COVID went in. I was finishing my class, and because of my administrative responsibilities, I hadn't been in the classroom for 7 years. Now I go back to my home unit, and I'm not even teaching my content area because they hired people to teach this stuff when I wasn't there. So I am presently developing and teaching a graduate class that I've never taught before. It's outside my area, and getting ready for the classes that I'll be teaching summer and fall that I've never taught before. Well, never taught before here, going back to teaching statistics and such. So it's really interesting thinking about your teaching philosophy because, as Annalise said, you'll expect that you'll be teaching similar courses that are relative to your expertise. And once you work through them once, you take the feedback and such, and if you fell on your face or not. So you take time and you develop it. Each year when you have that course or a similar course or you're expanding courses, you can kind of tweak things, but you're not starting from scratch. So here I am, full professor, starting from scratch once again. And it is a very humbling experience. So that being said, but my teaching philosophy hasn't changed. I still have, and my students know, I have high expectations. When I go into the classroom, especially for graduate students, I'll address the fact that They're all B students. They got here, they have a B average. If they want to be an A student, they have to show me. If they want to be a C student, they have to show me. So that's, and I just tell them that's the way it is. And, you know, they just think I'm crazy and old. but I've stuck to that all the way along. Not every student in your class wants to be in your class. You know, you may be teaching required courses that they're just trying to check off a box. So you have to understand that there may be people that are less engaged. And yes, you want to bring them along, but not at the penalty of dragging down those that are really engaged. So that's really a fine line, and I think you've learned some of that from experience, and that's why I think it's important to try to negotiate down that load so that you can really spend the time that you need in developing those courses early on.
That's really great. I think what I learned is that you have to learn how to pivot, because you have to learn how to pivot and adapt. So I think that's what I'm getting from this. What would you add to that, Tina?
This is actually baked into my research, the work that we do in teaching and learning. So I have a philosophical advice and then practical advice. We'll start with the philosophical because you can immediately forget it. Ontologically, you just want to figure out how people learn and how people learn in your field and how you want to address that learning. Are you a post-positivist? Are you a positivist? Are you constructivist? Are you any other ontological view of like how humans learn? And if you look up those words later, watch this video online. They're really big words about like what does it mean to put these things together and how we learn. And that will guide your teaching philosophies as it moves forward, okay? Practically, never start from scratch. You have networks, you have friends, and you have mentors. You email them immediately when you find you're teaching a course. You ask for their syllabi, and
That's what I did.
Right,
Exactly.
you just mash it all together and you see what sticks to the wall. Because there are great people thinking about this like regularly for years, and you should not have to do that heavy lifting yet, right? Like, and as you teach those courses, it will get better. As for if you're on an LMS system, ask for copies of their Canvas course. Please always give credit because this is the intellectual property that people are offering you. Look in your department. Figure out politics. Do they want this course taught in a way? Don't make waves your first year. If they want it taught in a way, just teach it that way, and secretly in your mind, make all the corrections you need to make. Right? That is how you survive your first couple of years of teaching, and you know it's going to be a struggle. And as long as you commit to getting slightly better every year, you don't redo the whole course. You redo a unit, a week, and you make that better. And then the next time you teach the course, you make another week better. And that's how I think you survive in practicality teaching. Unless it's your passion project. And then if it's if it's the course that it like means something to you, then you put yourself into it. And ideally you get a little research out of there. Like you do a self-study on teaching the course. There are also teaching grants and research grants. Teaching grants are always easier to get, but they're worth less in like university settings. That's what I have to say about teaching.
Okay, well, let's
I have
move
so
on
much
to
more.
service.
I have so much more.
I know. Do we need to do a part 2 of this? We might have to do a part 2 of this, but I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. So the next thing we are going to be talking about, what are some examples of impactful service contributions that faculty can make at their institution? If I do say so myself, this is a service kind of thing we are doing here, but if all three of you could add what are some impactful service contributions.
I've talked lots.
I feel like I've talked the most, like me.
I love this. You see how collaborative they are right now?
As a grad student, like there are so many ways to look at this. As a grad student, I really wanted to know that there's department service, college service, university service. You should have one thing at each of those. Maybe not university service, but as a grad student, I liked sitting on like a university committee that I knew was light work, that just so I could get a sense of it, right? Like I just had to sit back. I went there and I knew what was going on. So when I graduated from my university with a PhD, I tried to have like at least one thing in each of those categories, just like as a graduate member. There's also community service. So I judged science fairs. Does that make sense? It showed that I was invested in my communities and the schools I was in. And then there's also national service, which I split into state service, national service, and international service. And that is what helped me stand out in my field when I was looking for a job, right? And each one of these speaks to different people who are looking to hire you. So state service, I did like just state work on curriculum, like vetting science curriculums at state level. National service on conferences, like I volunteered either, sometimes I just worked the front desk registration. Like it doesn't have to be high achieving thing, but I was also the graduate rep on the organization I knew was my organizational home. And so there I wanted to show them I am invested, I am here to stay, you should hire me. Yeah? And so these are the different categories and buckets of service. And again, my goal for like my 4 years was to have one line in each of these things. And even that was probably too much service as a grad student. Does that make sense? But some of these are like my personal passion. I ran a Girl Scout troop, and I called that community service. Yeah? Like everything you do can slot somewhere on your CV, and a lot of them end up in service.
I really like that. So to follow up with that, Annalise, would you talk a little bit about the role of collaboration and professional networks play in both, research, teaching, and service within academia?
Yeah, plays a big role in all the things. Oh man, okay. We're shifting. Okay, so yes, collaboration is a really big deal. I've been really lucky to collaborate with folks nationally and internationally largely with my research and then also some of my teaching. So I want to echo what Tina said about like you should never be starting courses from scratch, and that is I think a really big piece of how we think about collaboration with teaching. Every course I've ever taught, I've emailed someone and asked for their resources. I have had the experience of starting a course fully from scratch because like I teach one grad course that is not really taught like in the country. So that involved but I still then emailed someone who I knew who was teaching a grad course that was like not the same but similar enough to at least get her syllabus. And knowing her meant that I had someone to email. So like having some sense of who is doing the kinds of work that you're doing is helpful not just for your research but also for your teaching. And then collaboration with research, I think this really varies by discipline actually. So I'm in a discipline where there are a lot of like lone wolf researchers. That's like, so we talked about like order of authorship. That is something that can happen in my discipline but also doesn't always. Like there are plenty of people who get tenure in my discipline who never co-author with anyone. Yeah. I'm not one of those people, but I think there's ways to be like thoughtful about collaboration either with I've been lucky to use collaboration to I've gotten to go across the world to go and give conferences with colleagues in different countries, and it's been amazing. But we also haven't gotten publications yet. They're still just sitting in peer review. So I think also being thoughtful about what kinds of collaborations you want to do and for what reasons is helpful to think through. Yeah.
Thank you. And Jeanette, I think I want to address this one to you. How important would you say mentorship is in navigating the complexities of the academic life?
How important is mentoring?
Yes. Or speak to the importance of it.
Okay. Mentoring is going to be your jewel to success. What you're doing as you're developing your mentoring skills, first of all, is that you are hopefully enriching the minds and the professional development of our students, of people you're working with. I told you my philosophy, and it's also something that gives us great joy to see our students excel and succeed. That mentorship can lead to professional relationships that extend well beyond the student-faculty relationship. You may continue to collaborate with your former students in a mentoring role where I have grandchildren out there now, and we're at an international meeting, and by grandchildren I mean my former graduate students have their own graduate students now. So we go to professional meetings, and it's like grandkids, right? So that's sort of interesting, and you just think about that when, in the midst of it, it's fun, you go to dinner, whatever, you go to see posters together, you collaborate, you talk about things. But when you step back and you think about what you have achieved as a professional, as an educator, as a researcher, as a teacher, how have you impacted these individuals' lives? And in turn, how are they continuing to impact the next generation? And it just, I think, brings a special joy to why we've chosen this field, why we've chosen to be an educator, a researcher, someone who works with people. Could I go back to?
Sure, you can always go back.
And this kind of ties to things when we were talking about service. In the health sciences, service learning is becoming very important and highly valued. The Science Olympiad that occurred just last week on campus, where there were kiddos all over on campus, and our faculty led demonstrations and things like that. But the piece about leading into some of these things and service, professional societies, you should all think about, or you probably all should be student members of some of the flagship societies for your institution. And going to those society meetings, those professional meetings, gives you opportunities to network with others and develop collaborations with other institutions. And when you do that as a faculty member, that is viewed very positively from higher levels. And let's see what else we have. Totally aside, but keep your CV up to date.
Oof.
Keep records, because you forget you do these things. When you're appointed to a committee, get it on your CV. We use Folio as faculty members, but there'll be some record-keeping system that your institution will use as well. And as you change institutions, that electronic system may change, but you don't have control over that. You have control over your CV. So keep that CV running from the get-go. You should start it now. You should be doing things now. You're here now. You're doing something to advance, and you've chosen to come here. That shows that you're dedicated to advancing as a professional.
I'm glad you say that, because we also have a workshop on that. We also have a workshop on CVs and resumes. So we also have a workshop on that with the Grad Academy. So whenever we send those emails, please sign up and come to that. I know you will come because you are here now, but you should sign up. And I know you.
The medallion.
Yes, the medallion. And I know Janet talked a little bit about mentoring, like how you would mentor students when you become a faculty. But Tina, could you touch on mentorship, like we see, like having a mentor in that relationship? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. These are people that are invested in you, people that want you to succeed. I would definitely choose mentors and explicitly so there's explicit and implicit mentorship, right? Your advisor should be like just mentoring you all the time. Also, your committee members and your advisors, if you haven't seen their CVs yet, you should ask them to see their CVs, because that will tell you where academic homes are possible. If you haven't found your academic home, the conferences that you should go to, it is on their CVs somewhere. So like dig into, and where you're publishing, which should also be on their CVs. Does that make sense? It is a calling card. I update mine once a year around annual. I know. Wait. Because
do what she say, not as
no.
does.
Do as I do on this one. Because I keep a record on my calendar.
Oh.
There's nothing on my calendar that I don't record. Otherwise, it's not worth to me doing the things. Sometimes I'll put something on my calendar as I'm heading to the thing on my calendar, so I can check my phone and see how long it's gonna last. Okay. So everyone has a different model. Everyone has a different model of writing. My calendar keeps every CV, and I can count how many times I had a committee, 20 hours for this committee that I was but my mentors taught me how to do that. Does that make sense? My mentors give me a million tips and tricks. And sometimes I explicitly ask them, so there's explicit mentors. I need mentorship on getting this paper published in this place. I found one of my peers' advisors was an editor there, and I was like, oh, can we just have the meeting, maybe the three of us, and you can just talk us through how this journal gets published. Does that make sense? So I would ask for mentors around publishing. I would ask for mentors around teaching. I would find mentors around different service. I plan on like hitting up Janet later and asking her what university places, like where's my easy service obligations? Because I bet she knows. Does that make sense? And it can be as simple and quick as that. And then there are long-term mentors that are going to see you through the hard years, right? Like they're quick and fast mentorships, and they will like get you through your day-to-day. But when you have a crisis, like there will be crises, whether it's about authorship orders, something gets messed up, whether it's about, oh, I didn't get my summer funding for this thing, how do I approach that with my chair? You need someone to go talk to. And ideally that would be your advisor. But it could and should be other mentors as well. Does that make sense? I think there are templates online you can find to like just mentors for different areas of things. Mentors about like, so I am with child right now. I had mentors in academia who helped talk me through what the process is about like getting supports from my university.
So
Does that make sense? Especially if you're family planning. What does it mean to be like a minoritized person in academia that is traditionally white male? Right? You need mentors to have those conversations with you. Okay?
Thank you so much for that. And if you actually want to practice being a mentor as a grad student, we also have that opportunity for you. I'm the communications person here, so listen, I will market any opportunity I get. I will not stay quiet. I'm doing my job. So I'm just gonna pat myself on the back really quickly. Thank you. So we also have Grad Rebel Advantage, which is an opportunity for you as a grad student to actually mentor undergrad students that are thinking about grad school. And we always need grad students because you may think you don't know enough, but the undergrad students don't know what you know now. So that's a great opportunity for you to teach them the things you actually know now that they're thinking about applying to grad school. You apply because you're here. You know what that process looks like. And also I think there's scholarships involved. There is scholarships involved. So if for nothing else, there is also a scholarship involved, so you can always do that. And that's a great way of giving back to the university. That's a great way of showing that you are involved at your university. So please, we will be having applications coming out very soon. Beginning of May, we should be having applications coming out, and I will be sending an email about that. It will be in the newsletter, so you cannot miss it. I think after today, you will always open every single thing the grad college sends because I send them. So please open that up. And I know you may have burning questions, so we are going to be taking 2 to 3 questions before we give closing thoughts. But go ahead, Tina.
I do think that would be considered a college level service opportunity as well. Just because you get paid doesn't mean you don't count it as service. It just depends on what kind of compensation is offered. Easy college level service line on your CV.
Yes, and it's a scholarship, so it's not really getting paid because it's a scholarship. So, but you know, sometimes we want an incentive. So, listen, that's one.
Or it would go under honors and awards in your CV. It could go like there are many places you could slot this type of work.
Yeah, we'll take 2 to 3 questions. Okay, I saw this hand first. Go ahead. Yes.
Okay.
And if you can say your name and department or name and program, that would be wonderful.
Yes, my name is Analytics, and I'm in the educational psychology department.
Yeah.
And I would like to ask, I waited till the end because it's related, but not so, for the people that are going to be going out to the workplace, and you know, there's only so many positions in academia. I mean, if you need to go into industry just because you're waiting for your opportunity, are you banned from academia? Are you like persona non grata anymore? I mean, you know what I mean?
Got to pay the bills, right? I mean, the answer to that question is no. And some of you sitting at this table probably are gearing toward an alt-act career. So at the end of the day, you're right. There are a finite number of positions, and you know, you do your best. And if you don't get a job in academia, continue to pursue opportunities. At the point of interview, someone may ask, well, you know, why were you out in this environment? And you just have to be honest with them. Say, you know, there weren't positions or there were no institutions that needed the expertise that I had. So I decided to take an opportunity where I'm staying current and still developing my skills. And I am, although I'm not in a teaching environment or an active research environment, I've stayed current with the research, with the literature in my area. You can address that question very easily. Yeah, I mean, but be prepared to have do the things that you're going to tell them you've done while you're collecting your paycheck elsewhere.
Yeah. Thanks, Jana.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could comment on if you were able to get startup funds, and then whether you were able to be paid a salary from the university, or do you have to pay yourself off those grants?
What do you want to do? I don't want to hog this. But
I did have startup funds. In my discipline, it's not a norm to be paid through grants only, so I had a real salary.
Okay.
I will say, another plug for applying to grants when you're a grad student, because my having received a grant, is it like a dissertation grant, made it easier to make an argument for startup funds.
Yes, on startup funds. My startup funds were $9,000. I have friends in engineering that have startup funds of $50,000, $100,000 because they have to build their labs. This is again why you need mentors to talk to about what's appropriate at different universities. And ours are different than M's are different than SLAC's. So I remember asking this question and feeling so confused. We're paid a 9/12 traditionally, unless you end up in the provost or one of the more administrative, is that how it is? Areas. So a 9/12 means I'm paid for 9 months of the year, but I'm paid each month, like so 9/12. I make up those 3 extra months in grants. So I have probably technically $12 million in grants at any given time. Nope, unfortunately not impressive. You think that's impressive, but like it's really field dependent. Like there are friends with like quadruple that, like, right? Like everything is relative, but you pay your summer salary out of those grants. So on top of a salary, like as an assistant professor, I believe in being very clear about salary things. When I applied for M's, they offered me like 60. When I applied for R's, it was 70 and above. Does that make sense? Like there's a distinct salary like tiering that happens there. So at the R's I applied for 70 and above, and then I could make up to 90 in a year if I could supplement through grants. Otherwise it's that base 70, 75. There's also a traditional 10% raise between ranks that is not traditional at every university. Most R's adhere to a 10% jump from assistant to associate to full, and those are the only times we can really academically like increase our salaries unless we do administrative work. And so jumping to those sorts of positions can be a salary boost or it could be a temporary thing depending on negotiation. Again, it's why you need mentors to help you through these negotiations. On this side, I've now seen applications and like negotiations go probably 20 to 30 times in terms of job searches I've sat on. But as a grad student, it was like, this is it. This is like I think I had 6 job offers the year I went on. And that was an enormous amount. Like, we're lucky if we see 1 or 2 job offers. I just hit a really lucky year with a really good CV. Does that make sense?
I would also say, just like tip, any public universities, you can look up what people are making by their name. You could do that right now for any UNLV employees. But also, like if you're looking for jobs and you're ever applying to public universities, you can look, like see if what they're offering you is competitive.
Keep in mind with startup funds come expectations and responsibilities that you will be productive and you will be gathering grants or securing grants, and you will be using those grants to support not only your laboratory but your students, and as Tina said, you can support yourself in summer salary if you're a 9-month employee contractor.
I'd actually straight up just negotiate for summer salaries. Can you provide me 2 months of summer salary in year 1 and year 2?
Yeah.
Just ask. It hurts to ask.
Our panelists were so great. They actually answered my last question without me having to ask it. So that was wonderful. But if you would leave one last word, very briefly, about 15 seconds, what's one last word each one of you would leave our students with today?
Gosh, I'm speechless.
Oh, wow. Any word of advice?
Academic jobs are actually, how can I say, they're challenging sometimes, but they're highly rewarding. We have so much flexibility in what we do most of the time. We can choose our subject matter, our careers. We can do things that we like to do. We have to do some things that we don't like to do sometimes. But by and large, we're advancing science, knowledge, individuals' growth, supporting all these types of things. It's a very rewarding career path that you've chosen, and I highly encourage you to stay the path and to put your heart and soul into your job. Balance it out with work-life. Don't forget that part. And let's see, the other piece was I forgot, as I usually do. So, anyways.
That was beautiful. I was gonna say another piece about mentoring. I think we often assume that like being a mentor for someone, of course that's a skill, but I think also being a mentee of people is also a skill, and figuring out like when to ask which people questions. And mentors for you don't have to be much farther along in the academic process than you. I still meet with I have plenty of peer mentors who are at the same level of me. I have friends who were mentors when I was in graduate school who are still in grad school, and I'm in this position, and I still like get their advice on things. Knowing who to ask which questions is really the skill. It doesn't have to be like these people who feel like unapproachable at different times. Yeah.
I'm gonna hit this aspiring line. I want you to think of when you're gonna graduate. You start applying for jobs a year before. That August before, I need all of your materials to be completely ready. Of course, you're gonna revise them, but I want a teaching statement. I want a research statement. I want a perfect CV, as perfect as you can get it, a year before you graduate, because that's the year you have on the market. And with your advisor's approval, a semester even before that, you might consider doing a soft search that would let you apply for some jobs, knowing that you're probably not qualified, to see what happens on that market in terms of maximizing the time you have to graduate with a job. After you graduate, if you do not have a job in hand, I love what Janet was saying about we need to pay the bills, but how do we stay active? I would expect my students to continue publishing maybe one a year with me to make sure that you're still academically relevant. I would still want you to go to conferences, all while doing a second year of searching. And then you'd ask very politely if your PI would continue to allow you to use a research assistant title on your CV to fill in that kind of gap while you held a real, they're all real, a work position that paid the bills. Does that make sense? And that would keep you more academically viable to apply for jobs a continuing year. Or I'd ask you, my students, I might ask them, are you willing to postpone submitting your dissertation so you could stay with us another year to stay within the research environment in which I can keep getting them to conferences, keep getting them networked, and giving them opportunities to apply under the UNLV banner.
Go ahead. If you have a grad college plug, I will never say no to that.
So this is a great panel, not because we're great.
Awesome.
No, you are great. You are all amazing.
But because of what you're learning. And I say this because one of my fairly recent doc student grads, who was an excellent student, came to me we were at a conference, and he said, Janet, why didn't you tell me about all this other academic crap? Things we have to do in our job. And you're hearing about that now. You're hearing about the other stuff that you have to do in the jobs. It's not just your research. It's not just your teaching. It's the service piece. And he said, I had no idea all these other things were involved with my job. So you're hearing it. And we congratulate you on taking that step to advance and to grow so that you have a more realistic view of where you're going next.
Every time you attend one of these things, there should be a professional development line in your CV that goes under.
Yep. Perfect.
This is
Thanks
how,
to the graduate
like, I have like
college.
like almost 40-page CV just because I include these things. Not because I'm great, but I am pretty awesome.
Yes, you
But
are.
like, right? It's because those sections, there's a media presence, there's a professional development section, all of these need to make it onto your CV.
I feel like I can talk to these three all day, but our time is up. So can we give them a hand, please? Yes.